GMGM. What big footsteps to fill after such an amazing fireside chat by Arthur Hayes and Paul Kohlhaas. But I'm going to give it a try. Definitely going to keep the TikTok signs with me. What are we talking about today? The title is From Petri Dish to Portfolio, Making Science a Liquid Asset. So you've seen actually the protocol in action today, whether it was Aubrey, whether we discussed this for Palm Science, but before I dive in, I'm actually just going to give you a bit, I guess, background that we also discussed, the why we're doing this. Pretty much at the moment, at this stage, the engine is staling, right? So science getting less effective, and you can actually see this. I mean, Paul talked about this a bit. There's actually, do I have a pointer? Nice, I have a pointer. So you see this, right? So the number of researchers is actually going up, but the productivity is actually declining. Same actually goes for the funding, right? So science is actually getting less bang for its buck, and DeSci is trying to solve for this, and also Molecules trying to solve for this. At the same time, since we've been talking a lot about intellectual property, the world of IP is changing. I think especially within crypto, right, you've heard about Story Protocol and other protocols or chains that are trying to bring soft IP onto the blockchain, which is basically porting things into the Internet of Money and making them liquid. But yeah, in essence, it's changing. I have to find the pointer again. Here it is. So the intangible value of IP is actually growing and growing. So if you see this here, I know it's hard to read, but basically in 1975, around 78% used to be, or 73% used to be tangible assets, and only a fraction was intangible assets. This has grown steadily over the past decades, making this asset class, super interesting, quite valuable. And if you look at the overall I could say market cap for intangible assets, it's estimated at 61 trillion, so not billion, but trillion, with science also making 1/3 of it, so 21 trillion. Legacy system at the moment are quite monopolistic, right? They're off-chain. It isn't the most efficient way on how intangible assets can actually be handled. And this is where we come into space. So Molecule Protocol, I'm going to explain to you a bit more about the details. I promise I'll make this entertaining, so I don't bother you too much with technical details, while still giving you some insights. But in essence, what we're trying to build, like what the hell is a protocol in the first place? Super vague. I'll try to give a bit more concrete example on how it actually works. So you've seen this with Aubrey. But basically the protocol V1 that we've designed, you can imagine it as a funnel, right? So you can start at the very, very top of the funnel. We call this proof of invention. So you can see this actually up here. It's a top-down approach, or in our case, left-to-right approach, which basically is more or less an on-chain registration. So to give you a concrete real-world example, I think the best way to describe a proof of invention is more or less a timestamping service that works on-chain. So the real-world example would be, I have an amazing idea, I write this on a piece of paper, and then I put this into an envelope, and I send this letter to myself. What am I getting in this stage is basically from the post office a stamp on the letter that says, on that day, this content was sent to that person. So basically, I have some sort of proof in the real world that on that day I did this. So it turns into some sort of tender, right? We ported this into crypto, so at least at this stage, you can go into molecule.xyz/inventions. So it looks like this. So you can log in with your wallet. We even support email logins, so a wallet gets created for you if you don't like wallets or don't like MetaMask. And then basically what you can do is you can present your idea to the system. We don't take any ownership or storage of your files, so basically just show the files. It creates a hash, so basically it encrypts what you've shown. It can be as simple as a picture of a napkin with your amazing recipe or something that you like. And then ultimately it can also be as deep as like a sophisticated file system, right? Your white paper, your raw data. So basically what we're doing is we're creating a hash of hashes. So, and then the very top hash is just anchored on chain. So there's a timestamp, the wallet that you did, where there's no disclosure about the files. So you're completely secure. It's like you're not opening the letter. You're only seeing this yourself. And then it literally costs a fraction of a cent. So it's cheaper than sending yourself a letter. And it's also globally portable, right? So you can carry this with you wherever you go without actually having to carry an envelope with you. Cool. Why do we do this? Very top of the funnel, all ideas, super early stage, super late stage, for you to actually then, at a later point in time, go down the tokenization path, right? So this is basically the next step where you can paint a bit more color towards your idea. So this is, for example, an IP NFT. This was one of the big things that Molecule brought to the table, was featured in Forbes as well, an article about this. But it's the attempt from Molecule to basically port intellectual property or valuable ideas, data into something tangible, which is a token, right? Usually, you know, NFTs as expensive JPEGs. We try to repurpose this technology to something more meaningful. So in essence, what an IP NFT entails, it's a non-fungible token, it's a unique piece, and basically it's just a legal wrapper, right? It's like PDFs. Molecule has done a lot of work, especially the legal team, to be able to protect this in the real world as well. Meaning that basically, out of the box, you can add metadata, lead researcher, university you're working for, a nice picture if you have it as well, and be able to secure this, and all of a sudden have something that is now more tangible, right? Like you can own this in a wallet, you can transfer it, you can get access to cool DeFi products and use it as collateral. But in essence, it allows you to have a unique piece that represents ownership about the underlying intellectual property. In the next phase, what you can also do, let's say, we treat this more as an open collaboration layer. This is, for example, the Aubrey tokens, the IP tokens that Paul was talking about, is the further fractionalization. So think about IP tokens as means for others to get involved in your idea, right? So I'm going to give you an example in the end, but basically it allows for you to invite other people in, and it's not sharing ownership about the underlying ideas, so you still own the IP NFT, you're still the owner, but it allows people to have a say in this, so it's more or less governance at this stage, right? Molecule has also done an extensive amount of work of trying to maneuver, let me put it this way, the fine line between securities laws and, of course, I guess security token and utility token. So you start out with a utility token. You can actually start token gating access to certain information about your idea. We'll go to this in a second. And also you can basically start having or utilizing decentralized communities to steer your project. And then ultimately also, especially for high critical transactions, so for example, minting more tokens, transferring the IP NFT to a different wallet, you can leverage this as well and just really have, let's say, voting power in place. And then ultimately this kind of hints at our new, let's say, legal protocol V2, which is real world assets. So actually turning this into something that allows you to then give token holders profit from, for example, buyback and burn, money flowing back through license fees, royalties, etc., which I'm going to talk about a bit later. All right. We wouldn't be a million VC-backed crypto startup if we then didn't deliver actually on the curation of these projects as well, right? So we've built something that we call a DeSci screener. It's basically piggybacking on Dex screener. So if you go to molecule.xyz, what you're seeing right now is basically a curated list of all of the top projects within the space, including, for example, Aubrey, so molecule.xyz. I should have put a QR code. And it also allows you to navigate this a bit more, right? So we have different categories, whether that's, for example, women's health, longevity, you name it, you'll be able to basically get a curated list of projects that use this framework that have already successfully fundraised and are liquid tokens. So basically means you can buy in and also sell out, buy out, you know what I mean. You'll be able to have a user profile, you see your holdings, curated list, and then also it's very much focused on the trading side of things, right? So it's very, I would say, degen, or as some say in our space, PhD gens. And of course, we have AI in there as well, so there's a co-pilot that helps you basically answer questions around this and maneuver the space. Nice. So I've talked a lot about the tokenization of these assets. And to be frankly speaking, tokenization is super easy, right? You've seen this with the Aubrey demo. You can prompt an agent now, you click through buttons, and then you actually have an IP NFT ready. So the tokenization is actually not the problem. And one of the biggest critiques that we faced, I would say, this year, beginning of this year, was that a lot of these projects, basically, they are open source, right? And especially when they want to start fundraising, they're open source, they're highlighting milestones, they say what they want to do with the funding, but once they received the funding, they actually turned closed source again, right? And it was really hard for people and for the funders to understand what is actually backing these projects. So what's the science, I guess, between this? So this was very much about trying to bridge the market or the gap between the market and the demand side of things. But we're in crypto, and we don't want to be the Ripple of crypto, but we actually want to be Bitcoin of crypto, of DeSci, sorry. So our goal was more or less to be able to don't just trust that the science is done and that it's being performed, but to actually verify this, and verify this on-chain, right? So we want to be able to call out good actors, call out bad actors as well, and keep people accountable that funds are being spent as they were supposed to be spent. So don't just trust, but actually verify the science. The ideal for us is that Web3 is disrupting by creating these trustless systems, right? So anyone can basically go into Etherscan right now and you actually see the circulating supply of Ethereum right there. Try this in the Web2 world, good luck. But yeah, so how does it look for science? And this is something that we launched in June, which was basically our attempt at trying to pack the token and the science that's being conducted behind this in a more transparent way. So what we did, we basically launched Molecule Labs. So think about this, at least at the initial version, as your decentralized data room. So all of the data that you add there, you actually own, and you're in full control, right? So literally think about, I would say, GitHub for DeSci. So you can actually underline what is happening with a respective project. You can verify regular update on the progress that is happening. All of this is anchored on-chain, so it creates, I would say, a cryptographic fingerprint that can't be tampered with, right? So I cannot just upload something and then manipulate it later stage because I want to forge my results to make it look good, but there will be traces of this. So we want to keep people accountable. We want to make sure like the science is in the foreground and it's not just a token factory. But yeah, in addition to that, it also allows you to token get access to files, right? So think about, I don't know, owning a certain supply of Aubrey, the token to then get access to certain information that the agent, for example, produce, or that the research that the agent initially started produces. And then at the same time, the idea is really to try to highlight the progress, thereby show the value, and thereby show the impact. We actually had really good success with this initially. So what you see here is actually also on Molecule.xyz, the screener. So we keep this on the degen side of things. Labs is not a front or consumer-facing product just yet. I'll go to this in a second as well. But the idea is more or less to be able to show exactly this, right? So this is one of our first IP projects that we launched, Prima Donna. Ella actually knows best because she was stewarding this. But what is happening is that projects are starting to produce results and they can communicate this directly tied to the token. And then what you see is update leading to trading volume. Can, of course, go both sides, right? So can go up and down. But the idea is to show this impact more and then also give people basically some sort of retrospective analysis of when certain data was released and what was the impact on the respective token, especially when you start fundraising or financing the research through the transaction fees of the token. So it's a really neat model as well. Great. So I've talked a lot about this, but in essence, what we're currently running through is this the current Molecule protocol, right? So you start with a proof of invention, you can tokenize it into an IP NFT, you can then further fractionalize it into IP tokens and distribute them, and then ultimately this gives you access, white labeled at this stage, to a Molecule lab, right? So you get your data room at the moment. What we're now going to work on, which is quite exciting and makes all of this, okay, let me put it this way first. All of this is quite static, right? So the asset doesn't really move, the tokens are trading, there's some data being updated, but ultimately not much is happening, especially to this part. And this part is actually the underlying core asset that in theory could be worth millions or billions in the future, and that actually represents the ownership. What we now want to introduce is more or less a way for you to make this much more composable as a protocol, because what we've learned, especially in the last quarter, is we integrated with all of these launchpads, right? We integrated with Bio, we integrated with Pump Science. In theory, you can plug and play any launchpad into this. But what happened was that you always need to run through the cycle. Like you couldn't basically just start here or start here, but you always need to do step 1, 2, 3, and then to get to 4. So what we're going to do now as like a protocol V2, I'm super excited to introduce this, is actually a V2, which is an on-chain lab. So the TLDR is that we're going to flatten the hierarchy. So you can think about it as like literally a naked lab or a naked space for you to start your research. It can be your private data room. You can start dropping files in. They actually belong to you. So it's not Google or anyone being able to censor you, but you're fully in control. You can decide what gets uploaded, what gets timestamped on chain, and ultimately also who gets access to this, right? So am I sharing this with my fellow researchers as well? Am I doing, I don't know, inviting any external researchers to this to contribute? And then ultimately also have the ability to basically branch out. So think about it as a cockpit, if you go into a plane, where you can start the engine, right? You start the engine's running, and now you can decide, am I going forward? Am I going backward? Left, right? Am I starting to fly? Of course, you need to also land that at a later stage. But the idea is really for you to have one single entry point. You can start anywhere, right? You can start naked. You can start with a token. You can basically plug and play it in. So basically, our protocol becomes much, much more composable when it goes to existing projects, because the reality is we cannot force people to just do everything on our side, right? Maybe people want to fundraise somewhere else. Maybe they want to fundraise with us, but ultimately we want to allow people to use this. So the idea is one single entry. You basically own everything. You can own the assets, you own the data, you can decide who gets to license the data. I don't want to go into technicalities, but ultimately what this allows you to do is that basically this token itself becomes an account. So think about an NFT that can hold other assets, right? It can hold currencies, it can hold other IP NFTs, it can hold data, and now all of a sudden you have on-chain transparency and it kind of sticks to this container, right? This standard was actually, it's called TBA, Token About Accounts, ERC 6551. It was developed in the gaming industry, which is kind of funny, right? Because back then the creators saw this issue that you have all of these tokens, non-fungible tokens, that don't stick to each other. So think about an avatar, right? I buy my avatar a jacket, a shoe, I don't know, a hat, and then all of a sudden I can sell the avatar, but the other assets still stay in my wallet, so they're disconnected. Now all of a sudden what I can do is I can give these assets to my avatar, and the avatar itself is a token. So when I start selling the avatar or I transfer it, all of the assets move across with this. So that makes it much, much more transparent also on-chain, what belongs together. And the neat part is about this is that, first of all, it can hold the data, right? So these are encumbrance onto the blockchain where you can basically say, okay, it could be a token, it could be just a POI, like a reference on-chain that comes from this particular one. And then at the same time, it also allows you to do more collaborative science, open science if you want as well. You decide the degree, fully open, protected, fully closed source. I know exclusivity is always a big topic, but it allows you to basically decide who gets connected. Researchers, investors, institutions, and this on a global layer, right? On a global database, which is the blockchain. And then also basically you can decide when you want to tokenize. Do I want to raise funds now? Do I need tokens on the back? So it really goes back to this cockpit view. And then last but not least, and I think this is going to be quite significant for science on chain, is that this particular account can hold also treasuries, right? So think about this. A project comes in, proposes milestones, and says, okay, we want to raise 500,000 and we're promising to deliver milestone 1, 2, and 3. And basically what you can do is you can, because it's nice in blockchain, code is law, you can program the rules. So I can give this account the money. It sticks with this account, and then I can determine and say, okay, if you reach milestone 1 and 2, you get 50% of the payout. And then in order for you to get the remaining 50%, you actually have to deliver on milestone 3 and 4. And all of this happens in the same space. So there's full transparency about milestone payouts, continuous flow of data into the lab as well, because think about it like a honeypot, right? The researcher sees this, the money is already there on chain, it's not just a self-promise, and all they need to do is just literally do their job and do the best work that they can in the lab to actually achieve this and have this outcome realized, more or less. So literally, Protocol V2 is making labs as a sovereign anchor for DeSci. So it's the same thing, it's still progress, it's still value. It is impact, but it's re-architectured. So super stoked to make this a reality, have this available for DeSci and the projects within, and basically bring Molecules protocol to the next level. So I think the time, I'm good on time, 50 seconds. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this was good after the fireside chat. So thank you very much and wish you a great conference.
Thank you so much, Kevin. For anyone who wants... Oh, we got a question. Kevin, you take that one.
I'm back.
Hello? Yes.
Thanks for a great talk. Just curious, who is vetting the projects you put on the chain? And who is actually going to be enforced? Any rules you could, or just, it's like anything, if it's project's garbage, is garbage in, garbage out, right? The investor get burned and then everybody leave. Right? Yeah. How you can really maintain a positive investment environment. My background is investment, so that's why.
Yeah, really good question. To be frank, I think it really depends on the respective project, where its origin comes from. So is it just an individual that starts to raise money for their idea, right? So it can be on an individual level. What you can also do is you can use the curation mechanism from, for example, VitaDAO, right? So they have scientific advisors that are actually thoroughly reviewing the science behind the project before allowing this project basically within their ecosystem to then, for example, fundraise this. So I think different curation mechanisms depending on the project's origin. We also, for example, at Molecule had previously fundraising protocol where we had an internal expert team review the science prior together with the universities to then decide does it get listed or it doesn't get listed. Of course, you cannot just say right now whether the project is going to deliver on this or not, right? That's the whole intent of, my slide is gone. But having the treasury on chain. And the nice part is the rules or the governing entity that can say, okay, delivered or not, can also be decided based on the project. So it could be, for example, the token holders, right? So they can basically review and says, okay, this meets our demand criteria, so going back to governance, saying the researcher goes in, says, I want to grab these funds. Do you have any proposal against this? Here's the science, validate this. You have, 2 weeks. And then basically token holders decide this. You can have a curation mechanism in place where, for example, you as a VC step in and review this with your own experts that says yes or no. So it really is up to you or for the project to define the rules to play with. But we want to give you the tools to basically decide, okay, what are the rules that we're playing with? Ideally, of course, they're kind of comparable across the projects, right? That's ideal, because then there's a certain standard in there. But the protocol basically allows you to have so much flexibility that you can decide the playing rules. Can be token holders, can be expert group, could be in theory also a trusted entity that you kind of delegate this to make that decision, but it's really up to you. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. The following up, actually, my first time to attend a Web3 event, never before. Actually, the question is the token traders or the investors are more individuals. More actually in traditional finance is actually speculators, right? So that's not mainstream. Actually, the mainstream is institutional investors.
100%, yeah.
You think your system is ready for institutional investors?
Really good question. I think definitely there are different, we call them funders, funder types. So one, of course, is just the individual that likes to speculate and basically just wants to get a 5x tomorrow, right? So it's really hard to bring these users to, I guess, a more mid to long-term science project and kind of make them aligned. But ultimately, what we're aiming towards, and Aaron talked about this earlier, is to be able to provide a system for institution that is actually attractive for them. And most of it is basically leveraging their existing IP portfolio that they have that is currently maybe underutilized, right, as Aaron also mentioned, to port this into this system and then allow people to, for example, get exposure to other areas within crypto. So think about basically being able to grant token holders certain rights as to get equity or get some royalty payouts instead of this, or even just having the ability to port your intellectual property into onto the blockchain and then leveraging DeFi, right? have some valuation on the IP, and then use this as collateral to then get additional liquidity to then do further investments, right? So I think there's a lot of work at the moment. So I can't tease too much because it's work in progress. But the idea is to really leverage this real-world assets narrative as well for DeSci and make this attractive to institutions and just more traditional TradFi investors.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Question at the front. There's the microphone.
Hi, I'm Oscar. I'm the CFO of Engine, a Singapore-based project. So just to follow up on that, I was curious, if delivery requirements can be decided by a governance proposal. I think we've all seen the good and bad of DAOs over the past few years, right? Especially when it comes to releasing funds from a treasury. Like, do you have any safeguards in mind to make sure that it's science and not politics that decides those technical issues?
Good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we are exploring these safeguards at the moment to try to understand what actually, I think one of the biggest problems is always the replication of data, right? Like people like to get the funds in and they do things to get there that are sometimes not in the best interest of the project as well, to put it lightly. But the idea is really, and this is going to advance over time, to make this as transparent as possible. As same goes for the data that goes in, right? To be able to replicate the science, to understand is this a legitimate update or not, and then move forward. We don't necessarily have safeguards in place to say, no, okay, this is a legitimate update or not. Like there needs to be some hybrid model, or you can even think about AI being able to evaluate this at some point to then give a score, right? Like is this a legitimate one or not? But then there will always be like a hybrid model where, for example, AI supports, and then you still have expert reviewers that ideally also have some sort of reputation within. Right? That's also something quite interesting to build out. It's like a user profile / reputational system that is that helps govern or steer the payout of these milestones. But TLDRs, we don't have, let's say, we're thinking about proper mechanisms to enable these payouts. But yeah, ultimately, there's going to be like some hybrid solution probably with AI and humans involved.
Thank you.
Of course. If you have any proposal, by the way, I'm more than happy to hear that.
I think we've all had 30 years of experience with internet forums and the experts there. So.
Yeah, fair. I think one thing to also think about, especially when you want to make this part of token holder communities, so basically the individuals that funded this to evaluate this, that you can think about, especially governance is a hard sell, right? It's not easy for people to like go govern things, says yes or no, is to properly incentivize people to delegate these funds to individuals that are trusted within the space that can then make a decision on behalf of those users to then expedite this process. Cool. You can also reach me after this talk, so thank you very much.
Cool, yeah.